Welcome to the 2019 Zacks Marijuana Investors Summit. Today, our researchers will unfold a generational investment opportunity. We're witnessing the birth of an industry with an explosion of public demand from $9 billion in 2017 to an estimated $32 billion in 2020. By 2025, estimates range as high as $146 billion. Truly, the tide of legal marijuana is sweeping through North America. Already 33 U.S. states plus the District of Columbia have legalized medical marijuana, and 10 of them have also approved pot for recreational use, as has all of Canada. In fact, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce called the birth of legal marijuana a historic event, comparing it to a gold rush. On the second day after legalization, lines stretched 400 people deep and many stores ran out of supplies. We certainly hadn't seen anything like this since the end of Prohibition back in 1933. Imagine if you had then invested in the James B. Beam Distilling Company. Even in the depths of the Depression, Anheuser-Busch and Pabst doubled their annual production from 1935 to 1940. Timing is everything. And just like the period right after Prohibition was lifted, wealth-building opportunities abound today. Certain marijuana companies have already shown extreme growth potential, like Tilray, which shot up 856% in 2 months, and Kronos, 145% in 9 months, Canopy Growth, 194% in 8 months, and Aurora, 43% in just 2 weeks, and GW Pharmaceuticals, 266% in 12 months. Yes, opportunities abound if you know where to look, when to get in, and when to get out. Now we're about to show you the single best way to get involved prudently and profitably with an industry that is just starting to soar. I'm David Bourne, marijuana stock strategist at Zacks. There's a wealth of valuable information to share, so let's get started. I'll be joined by other Zacks strategists to share what you need to know before you begin investing in marijuana stocks. Each strategist will apply their own expertise to a specific aspect of the cannabis industry. We'll spotlight stocks to watch and answer critical questions, such as, what industry and legislative changes are key to understanding which companies will profit the most? What should you know about the FDA approval process to get in on big money pharmaceutical trends at the right time? What metrics should you use to evaluate new cannabis-related companies that don't yet have a history of financial performance? How can you spot very small companies with low share prices and home run potential? And there'll be more. So with that, I'd like to introduce Zacks editor Maddie Johnson, who's going to get us ready to profit by tracking the sweeping changes in marijuana regulation.
Thanks, Dave. Legalizing marijuana has been talked about for decades, but real interest began back in the 1970s. During this time, marijuana had just been permanently labeled as a Schedule I drug, sitting alongside heroin and LSD, but ranking higher than cocaine and methamphetamine. This was all due to a law the Nixon administration passed. So at the federal level, marijuana was a no-go. The government's past demonization of cannabis and its Schedule I rank made it easy to label it as quote-unquote medically useless. This particular combination of factors then ensured that cannabis would not be developed for use in medicines through normal protocols. But at the state and citizen level, decriminalization was gaining traction in the 70s. Decriminalization is a lessening of criminal penalties, even though marijuana still remained illegal. Alaska, Maine, and Oregon decriminalized marijuana throughout the decade. And in 1978, New Mexico even approved a short-lived medical marijuana research program. Enter the 90s, the time of grunge and the birth of the internet. Specifically, the year 1996. California voters approved Proposition 215, and with this, legalization curiosity really took off. Proposition 215 was a landmark bill, as it was the first piece of legislation that legalized marijuana for medical purposes at the state level. Fast forward to today, and it's an almost entirely different scenario. Now, people suffering from all kinds of illnesses can get marijuana with a doctor's prescription to help relieve symptoms. This past midterm election saw another major breakthrough for marijuana legalization advocates. When Americans headed to the polls, weed ended up being a big winner. Missouri and Utah legalized cannabis for medical use, while Michigan voted to legalize the recreational use of it. Nationwide, 33 states total have legalized medical marijuana, and 10 states, plus Washington, D.C., have legalized marijuana for recreational purposes. State by state, things are moving forward, and most Americans now live in a state where some form of marijuana use is legal. This positive momentum is beginning to impact what happens federally. Under the current administration, President Trump has actually been supportive of medical marijuana legalization and seems open to full legalization. He's even said he will probably end up supporting a bill introduced by Colorado Senator Cory Gardner and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren that puts cannabis legislation and enforcement into the hands of individual states. This bill would also forbid federal enforcement of cannabis laws in states where its use is legal. And President Trump's Attorney General nominee, William Barr, said during his confirmation hearings that he wouldn't prosecute marijuana businesses that relied on what's known as the Cole Memo. The Cole Memo was written by the DOJ back in 2013. It limits the federal enforcement of marijuana prohibition in states that had voted for legalization. Barr's statements are a direct departure from the stance of his predecessor, Jeff Sessions, who rescinded the memo in 2018. It's another important step toward marijuana legalization at the federal level. Another huge win for marijuana advocates was the U.S. Farm Bill that Congress signed into law last year. What makes this law so important is that it legalizes hemp, a plant that's nearly identical to marijuana and contains a higher concentration of cannabidiol, or CBD. The law defines hemp as an agricultural product, and now American farmers will be able to plant and harvest the crop. Federally insured banks were also given the go-ahead to begin working with industrial hemp producers. While still not federally legal, legalization has come a long way in the U.S. over the past 40-some-odd years. Now that Canada legalized recreational marijuana, the push to do the same here in the U.S. is growing stronger and stronger. The marijuana industry as a whole, too, is rapidly changing, thanks in part to the desire for legalization. Investors used to have the slimmest of pickings to choose from, but now the industry offers growth, legitimacy, and the potential for big profits. Back over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Maddie. Here are the key points. Legalization for both medical and recreational use has been creeping along for decades. A majority of Americans now favor legalization. Efforts have accelerated in the past few years. Many more states are considering legalization, and historically that's given marijuana stocks a boost. The new Farm Bill broadly legalizes hemp production. Tax revenues are a significant incentive for state and local governments to legalize. And most importantly, the tide is turning in favor of legalizing marijuana, and that's fantastic news for savvy investors that are ready to pounce on the opportunities ahead. Now let's consider the two basic uses of marijuana, recreational and medicinal. Recreational use is fairly straightforward. It simply means the consumption of marijuana products that contain THC to experience the psychoactive effect. It's what used to be called simply getting high. The general format for recreational sale of marijuana is basically the same in all 10 of the states that have legalized it so far. Adults who are 21 or older can purchase up to a certain quantity of marijuana products for their personal use. And in most jurisdictions, consumption is not allowed in public places. Different municipalities make their own rules about licensing and taxation. And these businesses end up looking and feeling a lot like existing liquor stores. They come in all shapes and sizes, from seedy little hole-in-the-wall places to mom-and-pop neighborhood shops to sophisticated high-end boutiques in premium retail locations with a decor and atmosphere that rivals an Apple store. Though they differ in appearance, they all share the same basic business plan with nearly all retail businesses, really. Buy products at wholesale prices and then sell them to the public from a physical store at profitable retail prices. The medical use of marijuana products is much more complex, especially for investors. And here to help simplify and navigate this space and talk with us about the pharmaceutical applications of marijuana is Zacks resident healthcare investment expert and editor of the Healthcare Innovators Service, Kevin Cook. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Dave.
How you doing?
Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm going to jump right in. Are there any FDA-approved marijuana-based medicines on the market right now?
So as you know, we talk about the first FDA approval happened in 2018, and the drug actually launched in November. So very recently, it treats epilepsy. It's called Epidiolex from a company called GW Pharma, or GW Pharmaceuticals. And this is a really exciting company. It's a trailblazer in so many ways that I think are going to open up the floodgates here for big pharma to come in and start finding out what can we get from the cannabis plant.
Okay.
And this epilepsy drug is amazing. At the beginning of the year in January, J.P. Morgan held a healthcare conference, their annual one out in San Francisco, and GW presented there, and they showed a video of a family affected by epilepsy. They had a 4-month-old daughter that was having 400 seizures a day, and they tried various treatments that didn't work, and it was just extremely hard for the family. Anytime the child got excited, she'd go into seizure. Four-year-old girl named Grace, a new toy, warm bath, her dad coming home, and this worked. Epidiolex worked for this family. So, this is the kind of success stories we're starting to see. This company started in the UK in 1998. In 2010, they were already approved in the UK for an MS treatment that was cannabis-derived. So they've been at it a while, and you'd almost think we hear that Canada is ahead of the curve on the US. I think the UK is ahead of everybody in terms of research. So that's what's exciting about GW.
Got it. Okay. How does the approval of that drug, of Epidiolex, jibe with the fact that marijuana is still a Schedule I drug in the United States?
Yeah, so we've got the DEA controlled substance schedules, and marijuana is still on there in Schedule I,
Sure.
which is all about it has no medicinal use, supposedly, it's classified that way, and it might be addictive. But what happened with the FDA approval in June of 2018 was that it basically got fast-tracked. The FDA said, no, this is a meaningful drug. This is a powerful scientific innovation. And they got the DEA to bring it all the way down to Schedule V, which means it's not addictive, not dangerous, and has incredible value as a medicine.
Okay. If we're looking to see more things like this, how long would it take a company to go through the FDA approval process, from idea to being able to market a
it all depends on what problem they're trying to solve. If they're trying to cure cancer, that could be a 2 or 3 year trial, right? Mm-hmm. But in some cases, just treating the symptoms of a disease, that trial could just be a few months. So in the case of GW with Epidiolex, it was only 4 years from the time they submitted their application until FDA approval.
How about your personal opinion? When do you think we're going to see more drugs like GW's therapeutics?
I'm surprised we're not hearing about more companies working on it, but I think that GW has sort of opened the floodgates here, as the trailblazer, right?
Okay.
They got the reclassification with the DEA. They got an extensive pipeline, and when they started in 1998, that's all they were focused on was cannabis. So they've got a 20-year track record of working on this, and proving the efficacy and the safety, obviously. So, I think the other key is reimbursement. They're also setting a track record there because they're showing that doctors are prescribing and, using patients' insurance, whether it's on-label or off-label, and getting the key reimbursements, that are, it's vital with an expensive treatment.
Sure. Okay. What do you think that means for the existing big pharmaceutical companies if they're not going to have any marijuana products? Are they going to get moved out of the way by new marijuana stuff?
It's all about the size of the market, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, maybe the pipeline for GW becomes $1 billion pipeline, but that could take 5-10 years. Sure. So it's all about the investment. Does a large company like a Gilead or an Amgen or Biogen, do they want to invest in that R&D? Mm-hmm. But the potential is there, as they've seen, because in cannabis, in the CBD extracts, there's over 100 different compounds. So there's plenty to research there. Right. And I would think that they would be getting on top of that.
Okay. There's one last thing I want to bring up with you. Can you tell me a little bit about the difference between pharmaceutical products that are made out of CBD, like GW's products, or the CBD things that I might see on Amazon or at the drugstore or things like that?
Yeah, I think it's, I gave the example of treating a small child's epilepsy. I don't think parents want to go online and buy their own CBD and then, what dosage do I use, right? Mm-hmm. So it's about testing. It's about a doctor saying, I'm prescribing this, and maybe it's in a pill form, something that's very controlled. The quality is there, the precision is there, the testing's been done. Mm-hmm. So you've got safety and efficacy.
Sure, makes sense. Well, hey, thank you very much for being here.
All right.
I think the key takeaways that we had there were that there is about to be a flood of pharmaceutical companies who are going to try to make products out of marijuana, and probably mostly CBD, as that has had the most promise for therapeutic treatments. There's one already, GW Pharmaceuticals, that's already done decades of work and was the first to market with an FDA-approved drug that's proven to be very effective right now. And we're going to be on the lookout for a lot more companies like that turning these cannabis-based drugs into the blockbusters of tomorrow. If you're ready to start following my real-time marijuana stock trades, visit the link below to view the exclusive opportunity for Summit attendees. In addition to the big and small pharmaceutical companies that will soon be getting some portion of their revenues from cannabis products, there are a host of other publicly traded companies with exposure to the industry, including growers, companies that provide real estate to marijuana producers, supplies and services to the industry, and then also established players from other industries, most notably beverages and tobacco, who are making deals in the marijuana space. With so many different kinds of companies that now have some or all of their revenues coming from marijuana and the related products and services, there's been a bit of a frenzy to invest, and the prices have been volatile. Some of the newer companies trade at what, in any other industry, would be considered sky-high valuations. To get a better understanding of what appropriate methods are of valuation for these new companies, next, we're going to talk with Zacks valuation expert Tracy Reinick, editor of the Value Investor Service, for some insight. Hi, Tracy. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be here.
Okay, we're going to talk about valuation, and this is a pretty rich subject, so I'm just going to jump right in. Right now, on U.S. exchanges, there's only a handful of really pure play marijuana stocks that are available for trading, and currently the valuations are pretty high. Is that a function of supply and demand, where there's a big investor demand for these shares and just not enough shares available for them to purchase?
In quick answer, yes.
Okay.
But it has been improving. Many more Canadian companies are starting to list on U.S. exchanges, so that's giving us a few more options. And then we're just getting to start to see some actual earnings coming in with some of these companies. So that's helping a little bit on the valuation side. And we've had a little bit of air let out of the bubble on some of the stocks. Mm-hmm. So they've come back down to earth a little bit here to start 2019, and that's helped a little bit too. Okay.
So with those valuations, I know that Tilray and Canopy Growth don't even have a PE because they don't even have consistent net earnings. And Kronos does have net earnings, but the PE is really sky high, hard to compare to anything else. What other metrics would you use to evaluate or compare stocks in that sort of valuation?
I do look at these somewhat as you would say like a biotech that does not yet have a drug, but it's got something in development. And some of the marijuana stocks will be in that category anyways. But for the others that don't have that, I do look at it kind of similarly. So you have to kind of really pay attention to what the companies are doing in terms of what their plan is, what their strategy is, and then look at revenue too. Because now that the consumer side has been legalized in Canada, especially on the Canadian companies, they are now starting to really be able to grow that revenue on the consumer side. And so you're really starting to see that kind of metric, something you can actually track over several quarters. So I look for, does management have a plan? Are they executing it? And what does it look like in the future? Because you want to own companies that actually are able to produce what they claim they're going to be. Sure. And so a key component of that is looking into the future. Now, some of it on the regulatory side, that's going to be a whole nother thing that a lot of biotech investors have to deal with too. And so, like in the biopharmas, you're waiting for those phases to be completed before you can move to the next phase, and maybe the drug will get approved, maybe it won't, and all of that. But you have some of the regulatory issues on the marijuana side as well. So you want to check into that with these companies as well. But there are definitely metrics you can use.
Okay, excellent. That makes a lot of sense. For some more of these companies that are U.S. listed, and I was thinking specifically of Afria and Aurora Cannabis, there's not enough analyst coverage yet for us to compile a Zacks rank. Do you see that changing? Do you think that there's going to be more research coming from the street on these stocks?
I definitely think so, and I think a lot of them are going to be adding marijuana analysts. And I happened to jump on the Aurora Cannabis, their recent conference call, just to check and see how many analysts are on there now. Mm-hmm. And they had 6 on that third quarter conference call. That was more than I thought they would have because we don't have any analyst estimates yet. But I have a feeling now that we had the legalization on the consumer side in Canada, a lot of the big brokerages are like, hey, we need to have covering analysts on this now. We're going to start to get those estimates coming in, and we will get ranks on some of these, at least the bigger names that we don't currently have ranks on, I think are going to be coming through, in 2019.
Got it. Excellent. That's what I was hoping you'd say.
Yeah.
Okay. There have been a few big companies from outside the marijuana industry that have made big investments in companies inside the industry. And I'm thinking specifically of Altria and Constellation Brands, who've made significant investments in marijuana companies. How would you go about valuing the marijuana component of a business where, as for now at least, the marijuana piece is a relatively small part?
It is. That's why I always caution people, to buy a company like Constellation, which is so big to begin with, and then you just have this small component that's the marijuana, is really hard. But it does give you some exposure. So I'm not against going that route. And they've increased their stake, Constellation in particular. So it's going to be bigger in the future. We just don't know. You're kind of just going off of, the hopes here. But also in the Canadian market, they're going to be coming through with the regulations on the edibles and the beverages and all of that. But, that hasn't gone through yet. So we're not even getting any kind of, true revenue gains going on there on that side. So, yeah, it's a little bit more the hopes and the dreams if you're buying into these bigger companies that just have this small slice. But I still like that avenue.
Sure, great.
Yeah.
Sort of in the same vein, now that those companies have made big investments at pretty high valuations for what they bought, do you think that justifies the high valuations we've seen in some of the companies that are still independent or mostly independent, because there are these big fish swimming around that may be willing to eat them up at a high valuation?
Right. I think a lot of people are looking for that there might be some more consolidation or investment by outsiders in some of the players. But in any new industry, it is hard to know, what should they be paying. So they will look at the former deals. If I was going to do a deal with one of the ones that haven't done it yet, I'm going to be looking at what was paid before. So it does justify, I feel, some of the higher prices that are being paid.
Sure.
Everybody always overpays in the beginning in the new industries too, I feel.
Of course. But so you think those deals set essentially a high watermark for investment going forward?
Yeah.
Because I certainly feel like there's going to be other big companies in beverages and pharmaceuticals and tobacco and maybe industries we haven't even thought of yet who are going to at least get their toe in the water soon.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of opportunities there in the sub-markets that people really are only looking at the bigger, who's growing the cannabis and not how it's going to be used. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be areas which, as you just said, people aren't even thinking of.
Got it. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate that. I think we learned a lot. Here are the key takeaways from that valuation segment. Valuations on marijuana stocks now are high, but potentially justified because of the tremendous growth that's possible in the industry. Right now, the supply of pure play stocks is somewhat limited, which does naturally support the prices of those as investors try to get into those names. The timing of revenues is going to depend largely on the process of legalization in the United States. So to a certain extent, we're going to have to make an educated guess about when that might happen. And then finally, the investments by established companies are likely to accelerate. So when we're valuing some of these smaller marijuana-only names, it's going to have to be with the knowledge that they're all potentially, or many of them may be potentially targets for takeovers, and that affects the valuation significantly. So right now there are thousands of small and medium-sized businesses that all want to be the next Tilray or Canopy Growth. Many of them are only listed on small regional exchanges, over-the-counter, or Canadian exchanges. But I'd like to be able to talk about how we're going to sort of pick the diamonds in the rough out of this big crop, figure out which ones are most likely to be the next home run stocks out of the small ones, and which ones are likely to flame out. So with me here today, I have Brian Bolin, Zacks editor who runs the Stocks Under 10 service as well as the Home Run Investor service. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.
Okay, so talk us through how we look at these small stocks and try to figure out which ones are going to be the most successful.
You know, it's a very difficult thing. You know, small stocks have a lot of inherent problems. I mean, they are small just by nature, so that under $10, they're usually under 10 for a reason. Not all the time that's a good thing. So you're looking for stocks that have reached the bottom and turning around. You know, so one of the things that I like to do is look at stocks that have good revenue growth and trending higher revenue. So when you see that, at least you know the base of the business is improving.
Okay.
You know, and I think that's even a little bit more important than earnings growth, especially when you're that small.
Sure.
One of the other things I like to look at just to make sure that we're moving into the right type of stock is take a look at the float and the average volume. Make sure that those are trading at reasonable levels. You know, if you have something that's too thin, you know, you're going to see gigantic fluctuations getting into and out of any stock. And so you want to see something with just a little bit of beef or girth into the actual volume of the stock.
Okay, so that's for liquidity. You want something that's
right.
liquid on the way in and the way out.
Right. Just want to keep the wheels rolling smoothly there.
Okay.
And then I'll also look at the short interest position. Sometimes that'll tell me that when there's a bigger short interest position, that people have done their homework on this, there could be something bad. And just because there's a short interest doesn't mean that the stock is going to go down. Shorts aren't always right, and bulls aren't always wrong, and vice versa. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at these small price stocks.
Okay. I understand you may have some experience with one of these small price stocks recently.
I was in Medellin, Colombia, not too long ago, and went and checked out a grow facility there where they're focusing on the CBD, the cannabinoid oils, and got to see how they grow the plants, starting them with the mother plants to keep the consistency going there so that you can have, medical grade type product. And a really interesting space and really starting to open up there.
Okay. So that company is focused solely or mostly on CBD as opposed to THC recreational products?
Right. Pharmaceuticals is the name of it, and it is one of those Canadian names that we spoke of earlier. And for right now, the idea for them is definitely just the CBD oil. That's what they're going for right now.
Okay. And you think that's because of the relative size of the market or the potential market?
Yeah, and I think the market for the CBD is going to be many multiples of the THC. The THC does have its impact, does have its market, but the potential opportunities for the CBD oils seem to be much larger, at least at this stage in the market.
Okay. Back to the small stocks. There's a few things I'm thinking about that might differentiate the stronger stocks. One of them is having their own patents or intellectual property that they own.
Right. When you have something like that, or whether you have an agreement between, like Pharmaceuticals has with the Colombian government, where they're going to be the only grow facility for 2 years, when you have that first mover advantage or something like that, that can be very valuable. Again, you got to look at these types of things on a case-by-case basis and do a lot of that deep due diligence on each stock to find out, is there some large barrier to entry there that they have that will affect their market price?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me that even if it was a temporary barrier to entry, if you were the first in, got to sell at the limited higher prices, even if the market opens up later and gets a bit more commoditized, the first movers are still going to have quite an advantage.
Right. You're still going to be able to build your inventory in a time when the prices will be a little bit more stable.
Sure. Okay. And then how about capital expenditures? Do you look at a company that has spent on equipment or real estate or any tangible assets? Is that an advantage?
Those are, again, those one-off type of things where you're going to have to look case by case to see if it is, a meaningful thing. When in the case of Pharmaceuticals, when I went down there to visit them, I saw, that their grow facility was growing, but they also had contracts for other facilities should they, have the need to grow it basically at 10 times what they have right now. So, contracts, things like that are important to understand, but those are always off into the future, and those are things, if things are going right, that they have a plan in place for the needed growth.
Okay. And then the final thing I was thinking about was the management structure. Is there a particular management structure or style that you think would lend itself toward that accelerating growth from a little company to a big company better than any other?
In the past, and when I'm looking at stocks under 10, any company that has a very good venture capital backed name, backing from a very strong venture partner is always going to be beneficial. For these stocks, I don't think you're going to see that much of that, but if you do, that's going to be a very, very good thing.
Got it. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate it. I think we learned a lot there. And here are the important takeaways from my discussion with Brian. A small number of inexpensive stocks will ultimately be successful, and careful selection is the key, even in this hot industry. Revenue and revenue trends are important when a company doesn't yet have net earnings. And Brian looks for a reasonable size of float and average traded volume to make sure that there's the liquidity he needs to get in and out of trades. And then finally, big short interest can be a red flag. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's disaster around the corner for the company, but it generally does merit a little extra analysis. We'll be right back in a moment with the Zacks Marijuana Investor Summit. Well, as you can see, we're at the dawn of an historic opportunity, one that begs the question, did you miss the stocks that skyrocketed in the early days of the PC, the onset of the internet, the introduction of the iPhone? This is your chance to catch a similar game changer, legalized marijuana, just as it's ramping up for maximum profit potential. As I said earlier, we haven't seen a release of pent-up demand like this since the repeal of Prohibition back in 1933. And that demand is coming from millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers too. A 2018 poll shows that the percentage of U.S. adults that favor legalizing marijuana has literally doubled since the year 2000. Now, 62% favor it, with only 34% opposed. So what's the single best way to take advantage of this phenomenon? It's certainly not jumping on every promising penny stock that comes along, because marijuana stocks that blow out for tremendous gains can also blow up. Look at Axum, for example, a small-cap research company that specializes in cannabis technologies. In less than 3 months, it shot up over 4,000%. But then, over the next 2 years, it plunged to a fraction of its value. Timing is everything. It takes extensive research and constant vigilance to know not only which marijuana stocks to buy, but when to buy and when to sell them. And this is exactly the kind of detailed work that our team at Zacks Investment Research can do for you. I'll personally provide you with stock recommendations so you can make decisions in the fast-moving cannabis industry that are both informed and timely. Today, I invite you to take part in this new initiative, which is called Marijuana Innovators, a portfolio of cutting-edge stocks to take advantage of legalization that is sweeping throughout North America and the world. This is your chance to ride the industry on its trajectory from $9 billion in 2017 to an estimated $32 billion in just the next 2 years. We'll look past chancy penny stocks and long-shot operations that are short on fundamentals. Instead, we'll pursue double and triple-digit gains from strong pioneering innovators. Growers, pharmaceuticals, financial firms, and suppliers of equipment, transportation, and other related services to cannabis companies. There's no better time to get involved, and it's important to act promptly. To make it convenient to profit from our private buys and sells, we are limiting the number of investors who have access to them. That's why entry into the service will soon close. Get in now and be the first to see the portfolio's fresh recommendations. As a member of this exclusive group, you'll receive buy and sell alerts to update via your email or text message as soon as trades are added or removed from the portfolio, time-sensitive briefings to bring you market developments and news about the stocks we're holding, the Marijuana Innovators Guide that makes it easy to get the most out of the service. Plus, you'll receive 4 valuable Zacks bonus reports that reveal other industries that are also in their early boom stages and offer exceptional profit potential. Boom report number 1, 7 biotech stocks to buy now. Here, Zacks names companies poised to make a medical breakthrough that is targeting cures for leukemia, AIDS, muscular dystrophy, hemophilia, and more. New products are already generating substantial revenue, and even more wondrous treatments are in the pipeline. Early investors could realize exceptional profits. Boom report number 2 is the 380% revenue explosion. This report highlights 5 stocks to tap the stunning profit potential of artificial intelligence. Famed investor Mark Cuban says this revolutionary industry will produce the world's first trillionaires. But that should still leave plenty of money for the rest of us who make the right trades early. Boom report number 3, electric cars, which companies will surge? Much like the petroleum industry 150 years ago, lithium power may soon shake the world, creating millionaires and reshaping geopolitics. One company stands out as the #1 stock to buy according to Zacks research. It's not the one you think. And boom report number 4, the Internet of Things, connecting to the trillion-dollar trend. Over the next 3 years, more than 27 billion new devices are expected to go live, making it 10 times bigger than the entire mobile phone industry. This report spotlights 6 tickers to take advantage of what could be a $1.7 trillion market within the next couple years. Let me emphasize this package of cannabis buys and sells, updates, plus free special boom reports is part of an exclusive arrangement only for viewers of Zacks' 2019 Marijuana Summit. And it cannot be accessed on Zacks.com or any other website. Click the button below to see your exclusive price for 30 days access to the Marijuana Innovators portfolio, plus 4 valuable bonus reports. And if you're not satisfied, just let us know in 30 days and you will receive a full refund. So I encourage you to click the button below right now and get started. But remember, this is an exclusive and restricted opportunity. It expires soon. Now is the time to pursue significant wealth at the historic confluence of legislation, technology, and suddenly released demand. No need to miss out on the birth of the legal cannabis industry with its life-changing profit potential. It would certainly be a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you, and here's to years of prosperity and sound investing.